Clerk will call the roll.
Glenn Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy Charles Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Devin Allen, Commissioner Precinct 2. Here. Jerry Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4. Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation today will be delivered by Pastor Keith Sanders from the First Baptist Church of Keller, Texas. Thank you so much for coming out today. After the prayer, please remain standing for our pledges.
Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for the health to be here today, and we count that a blessing from you and your providence. Father, we want to pray for our court here today, Governor Judge Whitley and all of the commissioners, Lord. And you tell us in your word if we need wisdom, we can ask you, and you give it freely and abundantly. And so, Father, I know they have a difficult task before them, and so I pray on their behalf for their wisdom. Guide them, Father, help them to do justice, because we know you're a God of justice, and we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honoring the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Pastor, for coming out today. Agenda announcements, Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the court, just one announcement as it relates to this particular agenda. When we get to the work session in the budget aspect of it, we will have just limited discussion on that today. We intend to come back to you with a full discussion on budget-related issues next Tuesday, the 20th. But we will have some discussions today. Also, wanted to remind you, we mentioned it last week, but we're going to have a presentation on the JPS bond package and briefing, and then next week on the 20th, we are going to have JPS come to us with their budget for your review and consideration.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Court members, you have before you the minutes of our special call meeting of August the 5th and our regular meeting of August the 6th.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioner Fickus, I believe you have a proclamation.
I do. This is honored to read this today. This proclamation is for Professional Engineers Day, August 7th, 2019. And I know there was going to be a representative here, but I think we had a miscommunication. Mike Delis is not with us, is he?
He didn't make it.
Yeah. I bet so. We have a number of engineers in the audience.
No doubt.
No doubt. So, okay. Whereas licensed professional engineers are dedicated to applying scientific knowledge, mathematics, and ingenuity to develop solutions for technical, societal, and commercial problems while holding paramount public health, safety, and welfare. And whereas Tarrant County's licensed professional engineers have made significant contributions on a local and national scale, and whereas Tarrant County's economy has grown in part because its licensed professional engineers are instrumental in our community. And whereas August the 7th, 2019 has been declared Professional Engineers Day by the Texas Society of Professional Engineers in conjunction with the National Society of Professional Engineers, an organization founded in 1934 that represents the interest of more than 31,000 licensed professional engineers and those on the path to licensure who show the highest level of dedication to their profession in all 50 states and U.S. territories. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the Commissioners Court of Tarrant County, do hereby proclaim August the 7th, 2019 as Professional Engineers Day in Tarrant County, and call upon all citizens to join us in this special observance. In witness hereof, we have hereunto set our hands and cause the seal of Tarrant County to be affixed this 13th day of August 2019. So we want to thank our engineering community, and we will get this to Mr. Dallas here very quickly.
I second the motion.
Motion and a second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Court members, you have before you the consent agenda.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Could we go back to Commissioner Fickus's presentation? I'd like to ask the engineers in the audience to stand.
How many of them do we got? There's one. There's a couple.
3, 4, 5. Look at there.
I started out in engineering.
Yeah,
That was first semester until I got to calculus and,
close but no cigar.
yeah, beans were better.
No calculus and CPA?
Hey, look, I hadn't found any yet.
It's evident.
Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. Commissioner Fickus, since we're talking about engineers, our county engineer, I'd like for him to come up and introduce a new employee for the county. Joe.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Joe.
I have some good news and bad news. Randy would like to be here to be giving you this announcement this morning, but his dad passed away yesterday afternoon, so he's not here. But we do have a new staff member. As you know, Randy is our director now, and we have a replacement for him. Mike Galizio is our new planner, and he just started yesterday, so we thought we would bring him in and introduce today. Thank you.
Congratulations. Welcome.
Members of the court, we could go to the administrator section. One item we have to present to you yet this morning. On item number 1, we're requesting that the Commissioners Court award RFP number 2019-150. This is the financial audit of Tarrant County government to Deloitte & Touche. We had 5 responses to this RFP. We had a ranking committee made up of the Administrator's Office. We had a representative from Commissioner's Court, the Auditor's Office, and Purchasing. And based on that ranking, we are recommending that the Commissioner's Court award this particular bid to Deloitte & Touche.
I'll move approval with a question, and that is,
Second.
okay. How many years does this make for Deloitte & Touche?
I believe that they've done this for 5 years. 5 years? Yeah. This is their second in the contract. What we normally do, we do 1 year with four one-year renewals, and they have been our outside auditor for 5 years now. And so if we do this, and the contract is fairly similar, it'll be for 1 year with 4 one-year renewals.
I know where you're going.
Yes.
And
Go there for me.
Having been there, I would tell you that, a lot of firms now will rotate partners, especially if you're in the SEC area, you're required to do that. At the same time, I don't think we change firms just for the sake of changing firms. And now that I'm not in the midst of that business, I can say it, and people won't say, well, yeah, you're the auditor, you want to be there forever. I think that Deloitte has done a good job. They work well with our staff. We could end up, has there been any rotation? I know there's been rotation of staff because that just happens. I don't know with regards to the rotation of partner. I guess Terry's been with us probably most of the time. Terry Kyle?
Terry has been the lead partner on this endeavor, but the staff has changed constantly. I mean, when I say constantly, every other year or so.
And that's a big part of where, it's not a big part, that's where most of the work is done from that perspective. So I am not in the least bit reluctant about not renewing Deloitte because they've been here for the 5-year period of time.
Well, Deloitte has done us a good job, but it is a best practice that we rotate auditors after a period of time, and typically that's 5 years.
And I don't know who's best practice.
Well, let me.
I mean, I mean, to some extent, I hear best practices used an awful lot, and I don't know that, you know, some consultants or some other CPA firms will a lot of times say it's best practice to do that. I think it's, as long as you get fresh blood in there or fresh folks, and we're doing that through the staff part of the deal, then I think that's in effect doing some rotation.
I don't see a problem with this contract. I think when we get to 10 years, I had always talked in terms of 7 or so years, you should change.
Historically, we've had a policy that we would rotate. It wasn't necessarily set at the 5-year period. I remember when Arthur Anderson was our outside auditors, they did it for a 10-year cycle. We just simply don't maintain the same one, you know, for 15, 20 years. But I will tell you that when it comes to governmental auditing, the big 4, I guess there's 4 left.
Yes.
That a lot of them are leaving that piece of the business, and so we're very fortunate that D&T actually bid on this thing again.
For whatever it's worth, Deloitte has a huge presence in Tarrant County and in Precinct 3.
Yes.
So,
Any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Tidwell.
We have one item we're asking the court to consider this morning, and that is to receive and file the quarterly investment report for the period ended June 30th, 2019.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion
you.
passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Ms. Glenn.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I didn't think I'd get a word in this morning.
I'm
Commissioner
surprised.
Johnson's not here.
I know.
Move to receive and file the personnel agenda.
Waited too long.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes
Thank
unanimously.
you very much.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
you.
Mr. Beecham, come on down.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Your Honor, other members of the court, we too have a new employee I'd like to introduce this morning. Name is Eric Ware. Eric, would you stand, please? The interview was going real well until he said something about Roll Tide.
Now, look, I have enough to put it up with you. You mean you hired somebody from Alabama?
Well, he doesn't get to put stuff on his wall until he passes probation. So. But Amber has one new friend now. So.
Well, he had to pick a winner.
I can tell you right now, he's gonna roll right through you.
Welcome.
We have.
I'd be real quiet for the next 6 months, which will take us through football season.
What is his position, Jack?
Senior buyer. He replaced Tim
Senior
Jones,
buyer.
who just retired after 25 years.
Great.
Has 13 years in the hospital industry. Won't hold it against Mr. Early, but he'll do a good job for us. Glad to have him.
Welcome.
We have 7 items for your consideration this morning. Our first item is a bid award recommendation for RFP 2019-002, RFP for the purchase of election equipment. Recommendation will be to award Hart InterCivic Incorporated, amount of $11,163,653. If the court chooses to approve this, we're also seeking contract approval.
Now, I have several audience participations. I guess we need to get I tell you what, we're going to listen to them and then we'll do that. So at this point in time, I'm going to go through. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 7 audience participations. All wish to speak. So here's the rules. You come forward when I call your name. You repeat your name and your address, because in all likelihood I will mispronounce some of your names, if not all of them. You'll have 3 minutes. And we ask you to please be conscious of the time, and we'll go from there. So the first I have is Elizabeth Beck.
Good morning. Elizabeth Beck at 2717 Bryan Avenue, Fort Worth. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address you today on this issue. I'm a lawyer here in Fort Worth. One of the things that I have the opportunity to do every election cycle is work on a voter protection hotline. It means a lot to me to help voters in this county and across the state get to the polls and cast their vote accordingly. The ability and the function of our voting system is paramount, and it's the core, the basic principle of our county government. Without it, we don't operate. And so I ask that before we make a decision on the machine, I'm not here to tell you which machine to buy, but I am here to tell you that we need to make sure that the users of those machines have the opportunity to kick the tires, so to speak, to ensure that there's an ease of use for them when they're casting their ballots. I can tell you that several other major counties in this state have gone with the ES&S machine, and they've done so at a higher price than what Hart has quoted them. And I think that while I certainly appreciate the county being very judicious and careful with my tax dollars, when it comes to our ability to vote, I want to ensure that we're not skimping so that every person has the ability to go in and their vote be counted. So I ask today that we allow the voters to do that before we take this vote. In Tarrant County, I think we all agree that we're pioneers, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're guinea pigs. And if we go with the Hart machine, it will be the first time that this machine is used in the 2020 presidential primary. And that's a risk that we would be taking as a county. And so if we're going to take that risk, I ask that we open up this RFP process and let the commissioners, political parties, and the voters come evaluate the machines. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Felipe Gutierrez.
You did remarkably well.
Yeah, well, take a chance on myself while I'm coming.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Judge and Commissioners and friends. My name is Felipe Gutierrez. I live at 429 College Avenue in the near south side. I've been a resident of Tarrant County about 24 years. I just want to remind you that I'm speaking on behalf of myself today. I, like Elizabeth, am here as well to ask that the RFP be either postponed or reopened. The process eliminated the opportunity of commissioners to view the other proposals and the other machines and how they worked. And it also neglected to allow the community to have input on such an item that involves them directly as well. So today my comments are simple and to the point. As someone that's seen the presentation and seen the machines and has worked elections since 2001 as an election judge, I ask simply that I'm not here to tell you which contract to pick, but simply to ask you to reopen and reconsider the opportunity for you and for the community to see these proposals and how they work and how it affects them ultimately. So while my remarks are short and to the point, I ask you to please reconsider your process today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ben Daniels.
Good morning. I'd like to extend a good morning to everyone. I, like myself, as Mr. Gutierrez eloquently put it, is coming to petition the commissioners regarding this issue. This procurement, which involves the very fabric of our democracy, and it impacts our every single voter in our county, seems to have been done behind closed doors. Best I can tell, no one from the public or any advocacy groups or special committees were formed from any political party or from the court has had an opportunity to inspect, test, or operate the equipment that was offered to the county. It has been done in almost every Texas county within the past year. The reason why this troubles me is because the Tarrant County staff has recommended a system that has not been used anywhere else in the state of Texas. For as a matter of fact, anywhere, period. Our Tarrant voters would really appreciate the elections to either extend or reopen this, so that we can make sure that we provide security in our voting. With the issues that have been going on that has caused a lot of insecurity, we really would like the transparency so that we can make sure that this is done correctly. The question that I have is why did the counties of Bexar, Travis, Collin, Dallas, and others chosen the last few months the ESS system over the HART system? What do they know that we do not? So I would just ask that we at least extend or reopen this so that we can properly get this taken care of for our voters.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, little man.
Next is Amy Denise Smith.
Hello, I'm Amy Denise Smith. I say at 7500 Maplewood Avenue in North Richland Hills. Today I'm talking to you about the HART system versus the ESS system. I am informed that in both Bexar County and Dallas County that they took the time to meet in those counties and do a decision on the voting system where before HART was even allowed, that they were given a reduced price of $5 million for their system before they even took a vote. And clearly that concerns me, because if you're willing to reduce your system by $5 million, what's the problem with it? There has to be something wrong or something you're not telling people is effective within your system to limit it that much amount of money in your profit as a company and as a voter. So this concerns me because as a company who is supposed to be in research and development to improve our ability to cast our votes most effectively, that they're not even willing to invest $5 million, they're willing to take $5 million out. So my concern and my question for the Tarrant County Election Office is, what is the recommendation for this vendor to this court that was offered, which knowing this happened in other counties? Thank you.
Thank you. Gwen Johnson.
Well, good morning. I'm Gwen Johnson, 7500 Maplewood Avenue, North Richland Hills, Texas. I am precinct chair of 3214 in North Richland Hills. I've been in this process for over 30 years. I am an emergency election judge, and Commissioner Brooks and all, he knows me. But
yes, ma'am.
My reason for coming before the court this morning is to ask you to please, before you make a decision on this equipment, I've had numerous conversations with the elections administrator concerning different elections where the voters have had problems. The voters of Tarrant County, since this, I don't know, but I'm sure you guys have the stats to where Tarrant County is considered one of number 13 largest cities in the country. You issued the RFP back in January, and with a deadline for any vendor that wanted to submit a bid. Okay, and then you extended it for 90 days. So what I'm here to do is to ask you to please consider postponing your decision here today until all the stakeholders, regardless of what party, have had a chance to review the attributes of both vendors, ESS and HART, and until the court has reasonably decided that a fair, honest, and transparent procurement has occurred to ensure that the most sacred component of our democracy has been fulfilled honestly, and that this court has assured that for years to come that Tarrant County elections are conducted with the most accurate and fair accounting possible. We owe the community nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Raphael McDonald.
Raphael McDonald, 9161 Autumn Falls Drive in Fort Worth. That's Precinct 1. I've served as a deputy election judge for my precinct in Northeast Fort Worth. The idea of doing something sight unseen is something most people simply wouldn't do. You wouldn't buy a car without driving it, checking out the brakes, and seeing how it rides. You wouldn't rent an apartment without checking out the property, looking at the layout, and scoping out the neighborhood. And I, for one, wouldn't buy a new suit or a new pair of shoes without trying them on to see how they look on me. That's why I'm gravely concerned that no one here at the Commissioners' Courts had a chance to review and test out the two voting systems that are up for consideration today. I'm equally concerned that the public has not had a chance to weigh in either and see which of the voting machines work best for the majority of people. I'm coming here before you to speak and asking the court to postpone making a decision on these voting machines. From where I stand, you and the citizens of Tarrant County need more time to actually figure out which one of these systems is really best for the voters. The only fair way to do that is to physically test these machines out in person. Kick the tires, give them a good inspection, and check to see if it's a perfect fit, to use the analogies that I mentioned earlier. This is not an issue of politics. All of the stakeholders here in Tarrant County, regardless of who they have voted for or who they might back in the future, need to be able to critically assess the pluses and minuses of both systems. Then and only then can the county and this body make a fully informed judgment on which system is indeed the best for the next decade plus. Dad used to use an old expression, you need to measure twice and cut once. The people of Tarrant County deserve a fully informed decision that is rooted in observable interactions and facts. So I'm asking you again, please delay the vote on this RFP today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Peggy Beauchamp.
Hello, I'm Peggy Borchert, 7129 Norma Street. I come here because I'm interested about the integrity of the elections. I know you all want us to have safe elections. Every election is important. The 2020 election is especially important. I want to say I've heard some good things from Dana Trowbridge about the machine you're considering. One thing in particular is the provisional ballots, the one where they will not be taken into the machine. They have to be taken to a clerk so that we won't be getting provisional ballots. I understand that's one of the machines the machine and the one she prefers. So I don't have a yes or a no. I couldn't get any clear information on good or bad. So I didn't know who to go to, an unbiased person. What is important is to get an accurate count of each vote. What is important is that only eligible voters are voting. My concern is that only people who are legal voters are voting, and that they are only voting one time. Can we be sure that these new machines guarantee this? The last time I was a judge, about a year ago, I was in a new, unfamiliar location. We were still using polling lists. I was working with people I did not know. Voters rushed in, and we had to very carefully tally the voters. I missed by 3 votes, and I was later on told that I did that. But I recorded that I did anyway. Why are we reducing the checks and balances? I understand we are. Anyway, we are reducing the checks and balances for who votes. We need to continue to have poll lists or some way of checks and balances. We can't be naive thinking that no one will cheat. We are living in a lawless society that believes that there's no right and wrong as long as they win. People are angry with all the hype in the news. There will be a lot of suspicion and anger in the 2020 election. We need machines that can be trusted to make an accurate tally of the vote, which will alert if the judge and the clerks, if the people are voting illegally. We need to quit being so nice and naive. People are people. They want to win. Some people have no guilt over cheating, and so we need to take that into account. It's human nature. It is wrong, but some people don't care. They just want to win. Our founders knew the nature of man. That is why they required so many checks and balances in order to ensure our government would not abuse us. The Bible tells us the nature of man is fallen. So we have to check, we have to have checks and balances. Do these machines provide these checks and balances? If not, I don't want them. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Okay, that is the last audience participation that I have. At this point in time, I guess what I would like to do is I would like to call our elections administrator up and allow him at this point in time to describe the process. And Jack, I think you need to be also a part of that, the process that we went through and how we got to where we are today. So, oh, there's Jack. I was going to say Jack Lee, but no, he's still there. Hyder, you want to start it off?
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, Your Honors, for the opportunity to talk today. So I guess I'll try to summarize the process that we've been through. We started this discussion last year. I was in Commissioner's Court, and we discussed what type of voting machine we wanted to get for Tarrant County. And it was clear that, a clear indication by the court, we want something with a paper trail and want a hybrid system. That's what the court instructed me to find. So we wrote an RFP that specifically told vendors, anyone who comes to Tarrant County, to present an offer for a hybrid system with a paper trail. In those terms, every offer we received was offering the same kind of voting machine, right? A terminal where you would vote, get a printout of your choices, and then to turn around and put it in a scanner to get it counted. We published the RFP in January. We received 3 responses: ES&S, HART, and Dominion Voting Systems turned in their responses. And we put together a panel of 13 people, 11 from the elections department, including all units, voter registration, the warehouse, the election day, the early voting, central count, every aspect of our operation, and we included 2 senior managers from IT, including the county's IT security officer. We proceeded to evaluate the offers and score them, and according to the purchasing procedures and manual, the vendors were invited to demonstrate their technology. So we spent with each vendor a full day. We gave them the data of our primary elections, our May elections, and our November elections, the 3 type of elections we run, and we told them, we expect you to show up and not demo this with who's your favorite Avenger, but a real Tarrant County ballot for each one of the scenarios we have. We had an extensive checklist that we went through with them, from everything that started with loading that data, designing the ballots, showing us how the ballots look when they were printed, assembling a mock polling place in our office so we could see what the poll workers would go through with each one of them, how they unpacked it, how they packed it, how much they weighed, how difficult they were to hook up together or not, what the voter went through when they voted, provisional handling, exception handling, everything that had to do with experience. Then we asked them to pack them. We actually gave them samples of our containers and said, show us how they fit, how many we can fit per unit, so we can estimate, let's say, the impact of having to buy additional containers or not. So we went through a very extensive check. I guess that's what one of the comments we had would call looking under the hood of the car and having the tires checked. We went through all of that with each vendor. And then, according to the process, after the demos were completed, the evaluation panel turned in adjusted scores, the second round
Let me
of scores.
stop you and ask you one
Yes, sir.
question. In the demo package, did you invite anybody other than the evaluation committee?
Both the Republican and Democratic Party were invited. The Republican Party sent someone, the Democratic Party didn't. And part of the process we had was the representative from the Republican Party gave us a write-up of her impressions on the process for each vendor. And so that was distributed to all 13 members of the panel so that they could consider that when they did the second round of scoring.
And who did she recommend that we select?
Her write-up explicitly says Hart was her favorite vendor.
Okay.
So we went through the second scores, and then after that, I would probably defer to the purchasing agent to go through the details of how we went through the best and final and how we got to today, because it was an administrative process. Yes, sir. Your Honor.
Before you get too far distance from the Republican representative, you said the Democrat representative, did they contact you and say they wouldn't be there, or come
No,
a
Your
different
Honor.
time, or?
We sent out the invitations. We followed up on it. The day of the first demo, they were not there. We tried to make calls. We left messages, sent emails again by the morning of the second demo. Halfway through the second demo, 2 out of 3, it just became, we're not getting a response, and we just carried on.
We had to be, I mean, to some extent, one of the conversations was we could not have the party chairs because that would have created a quorum of the election commission. And so we had to ask for representatives from, and we asked the party chairs to appoint representatives.
Correct.
And that's where the representatives were to come from.
So, Jack, do you want to elaborate on the post-demo? We went through the best and final offer. After doing that, both vendors were requested best and finals, and then the process.
Jack, why don't you or Chris come up and explain the evaluation process again, how that was handled, and
I'm going to let Chris Lax, my senior contract administrator, and Christina Martinez address that. A comment I want to make, I've heard transparency mentioned several times. Tarrant County is the only county in the state of Texas to be awarded from the Comptroller's Office the Procurement Transparency Award. That's a big deal. We take this very seriously. We do hundreds of RFPs a year. We knew we had one shot to make this right, and this one's right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So during the course of any solicitation, vendors have the opportunity to put their best foot forward. One of those situations is a presentation. Each vendor had a day to present their products, as Hyder said, and Christina actually administered those proceedings. But in addition to that, there was an additional opportunity to perform a best and final offer. So the 3 vendors had every opportunity to put their best foot forward, and after reviewing the process, we stand by the decision, by the scores as they are.
so the evaluation team evaluated the equipment from several different within several different categories and assigned points to each one of those.
Exactly.
And then those points were accumulated, and the accumulation of those points resulted in what ranking?
So they resulted in the ranking that's demonstrated in the spreadsheet that's attached, with Hart being the highest scoring vendor.
Okay, and then ES&S, and then Old
And then
Dominion.
ES&S.
Any questions regarding that part of the process?
Well, okay, so when was the last time that we purchased election equipment?
The original purchase of this one, I can't go back that far, but I do recall seeing purchases in 2006 and 2007. So I don't want to assure you that that was the first time we bought this current set, but at least that was the last time I saw it.
And so what was the process that we followed then to evaluate the vendors or the equipment?
Back then?
Yeah.
I don't have an answer for that, Your Honor. I'm sorry.
Who could answer that? Thanks.
That's a while ago. We went through a bid process. I'm not sure if it was a bid or an RFP. I can verify that. I'll have to look at my archives, but the only other solution would have been to purchase it from a cooperative, which would have been a buy board. I honestly do not remember. I can verify that for you, though.
Yeah, okay. And then also, a follow-up to that is what is different from the process that we followed then versus now, which I'm not necessarily saying that it should be any different. I don't know, but I'd like to know, what do we do then? What did we do then versus what we do now? Perhaps why those changes were made, if any.
We're actually performing, going through the process for RFPs more so than we did back in 25 and 26, 27. It's more of an objective process. We actually removed the pricing. The eval committee did not see the pricing that was inserted later on, so it's just the equipment as it sits on the ground at that time. But back then, if we did not, that's the new wave in the last 10 years, going more of an objective process rather than just straight price.
What about public involvement in the, can you remember or recall to what extent were public involvement?
I don't think that there was any at all, as I remember. Robert Parton was our election administrator, had been here for years and years and years. I don't remember that, to be honest with you. I just don't.
Okay.
We certainly didn't, I remember, check with both parties back then, as I remember.
I'd like to ask Ida. When does this equipment have to be bought?
Today. So our goal is to implement vote centers this November. We cannot do that without this equipment. And we're 83 days from November. We're on a tight timeline, but we can still pull it off if we vote this today. But not doing it today would mean that we would now have a conversation of not having vote centers in November and possibly deciding to use equipment for the first time in the primary in March, or skipping all of 2020 altogether, which I would seriously not recommend running 2020 on 15-year-old machines. So that's the situation we're in today. About the public involvement, the only other thing I would say is that's not the standard process, and we didn't do that either with the electronic poll books, just as a reference.
Now, and let me just say something. Regardless of whether we get approved for vote centers or not, the goal from the very beginning in January was to purchase equipment in time to get it into the polling places by the November election this year.
Correct.
In an effort to be able to have our first run at using this new equipment on an election that would not be near as massive as a March primary or the following general election. So that's why when he says today, basically we're at the point to where if we go further than this, in all likelihood, we may not have it ready. And having it here is not as much of a problem as having time to train the
Correct.
people
Correct.
on the use of the equipment. And it's
Correct.
not, my guess is that's not going to be just one little training session right before we open. It's going to be giving.
We have a room and resource center reserved for a full month of September, 2 months actually, September and October, to process all 2,000 expected poll workers for November. So we need that in time.
It'll be 2 months of training, you're saying, then from.
Every single person will be trained, and that's end to end. If I may go back a little bit on the comments, one thing that came, I'm looking at my notes here, that was recurrent in the comments from the public. Colin, Travis, Dallas, other counties not choosing Hart, even though they bid at a lower price. I can confirm to you that at least Colin and Bexar County were not offered the same equipment that we were offered. So our solution is an all-in-one machine where you put in the blank paper into the same touchscreen you use, and it prints it out for you. What they were offered was a touchscreen that had a desktop printer next to it. And so that has a big problem because if you have a power failure, even though the touchscreen has a battery, the printer doesn't. And so you would have to buy UPSs, and that's an additional cost. And so although I don't want to speak for other EAs or other counties, I can at least confirm that they were not offered the exact same product that we were offering. That may explain part of it. And then there were some other questions about, the history of the company, the reputation of the vendor. HART has been a vendor for the last 15 years. And we've had solid support. Every time we pick up the phone, they're there. I mean, that was part of the process, and the evaluation, the RFP process calls for checking references and all of that. But for those who asked this question, I think I'm saying it right, Denise Smith, we know the vendor. We work with them, and we have a solid relationship, and they've always been there when we needed them.
And are there any concerns related to the longevity of that company or any other company? How do we consider that in our bidding and evaluation process?
Well, and there are these three vendors are what in the elections community are known as the big three. So these three add up to something like 80% of the market share in the country. So these are solid companies, all three of them, that pretty much run the elections in the United States.
And
are the technologies, is the functionality between the two systems similar?
Absolutely. And so if you look at the attachment on the court communication, there is a score. Let me use the right words here. So there's pricing, references, and scope of work. That third line, scope of work, is where this evaluation panel considered all the different factors we had. Voting experience, poll worker usage, even packing and transporting, logistics, central count, everything that had to do, right? So there was a whole matrix of things to look for, things to evaluate, and those criteria had different weight. And of course, some of the most important were the ones that had to do with voter experience. The scores actually show us that HART Civic got a higher rate by the entire panel. But like I said, the RFP was written and designed so that we could find solutions, or that the vendors would have to present solutions that solve the problem the same way, having a touchscreen that would create a paper trail that we can then scan to count them.
And again, the evaluation piece of this by the evaluation committee was done without knowledge of the price.
Correct.
And then once they did that, then when we looked at the price, you then ask everybody to give best and final offers.
Correct, but at that point, the evaluation committee had finished all the, let's call it technical evaluation, and there was no more changes to score. So it was done completely disconnected from the pricing. Bids are actually requested in a way in which the pricing is in a separate sealed envelope that only purchasing has, and they do not share even with me as the elections administrator. I didn't see them until all scores were in and Christina had tabulated everything and said, now I can share this with you.
And then the best and final offers came in. HART was, for the equipment, was $10,153,000. ES&S was $12,024,000. The first 2 years of maintenance from HART were $505,000 per year. For ES&S, it was about $815,000 per year. And then the third year, HART was $505 per year, and then ES&S was about $799, $710, or about $800,000 per year.
Correct.
So there's about $295,000 difference there.
Correct. So the license for the ES&S system would actually be more expensive on the recurrent annual budgets that we have for about $300,000.
How is it determined who was able to participate in the demonstrations of the equipment?
All three vendors. I mean, at that point, my purchasing agent and I talked about what's the usual process, and they said we usually invite the top two, and I said there's only three, let's invite all three of them just to see all of it. It makes no sense. If we had 20, maybe that would have been a discussion, but at that point it was just an extra day of demo. Bring all three of them in.
Sure.
So
I'll
we see
clarify
everything.
my question. Not the vendors, but who was actually allowed to attend how is it determined who was able to attend the demonstrations as the user, as the potential user?
So again, according to the purchasing manual, there's an evaluation committee, and that's these 13 people from the elections department and IT that came together, plus the two parties that were invited to attend as well.
Okay. So that's county policy?
Correct.
Well, I don't know that there is a policy written to that extent. That in
Unless-
the determination of that, that's who.
We always ask the department how many and who the evaluation team is going to be comprised of. Probably a point to make also, all three firms were given the opportunity to turn in a best and final. Excuse me, the time that they were to perform their demonstrations, we drew lots out of a hat to determine what time slot each company was to be put in for those demonstrations.
Yeah, but she's still talking about.
How was it decided who was going to be on the evaluation team?
No. It was, why, I think the ultimate question is, why did we limit it to just two people other than the people on the evaluation team that had an opportunity to look at that? And I would just tell you that in the conversations from the election, from that perspective, it was, okay, let's make sure that the parties have representatives who can come in and look at it. I don't think in any of our purchasing processes have we ever allowed a public member to be on the evaluation team. But as opposed to just saying, okay, we're going to throw this thing open and let everybody come in, and I mean, we had 11 members who vote, who got a chance to look at it, and then we asked each party to send a representative to do that, feeling like, okay, those are your two, but each major party, I guess I would say. And that's what we're doing. Should we have said 10? Should we have said 100? You know, I don't know. But
well, I mean, we did form the Citizens Advisory Committee, so perhaps
Correct, but
they
we
would
did
have
have-
been an appropriate group to review it.
But also, part of the reason when you have these bids, it's usually county employees that are the panel. It's because one of the essential principles to protect the process is that you don't want your panel members to be influenced or contacted by the outside, right? So having them as county employees gives us a lot of control over. It's kind of like a jury, right? And so we can't sequester people while they're on the panel. But we do have policies in place, and having them as county employees helps us protect the sanctity of the process, and the sanity sometimes, from any external influence that we don't want affecting the process.
I'm just attempting to get to the answer that multiple questions that have been raised about who is allowed to participate and why was it such a limited
This was
scope.
treated, in essence, as a regular county purchase under the same standard, the same procedures, everything that we always do. We felt that any deviation from that might have also given grounds to, why did you do something different? Why do something special for this? Was it, to allow influence or do something? So it was treated as a standard purchasing process for the county, just like when we buy cars or guns for the sheriff's department or anything like that.
In answer to your earlier question, Commissioner, RFP 2006-0005 was an RFP.
I'm sorry.
It was an RFP back in 2000.
Okay. May I have that?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
This one is yours.
I guess I'm looking down the questions, and I too, that were raised in this deal. I feel like we had input from the two parties, or the opportunity for input. We had one of the parties recommend, the one that sent the representative, recommended the HART system. It went through evaluation committee. I think we got the best and final offer, and in all of those areas, HART came up the selected or the preferred selection. And given that, and given the fact that we are trying to get this in place for our November election, whether it's vote centers or not, I hope that we'll go ahead and move forward with this today and not delay it.
I got a question. Hyder, it's my understanding the Secretary of State's office, the state has approved this equipment.
Correct,
Is it
Honor.
certified that
Yes.
do you know much about the process they went through to approve this equipment?
Yeah, so we wouldn't be able to be in court if they hadn't approved it, because we have to send them the parts of the contract that talk about what we are buying, and then they send us a letter back saying, yes, now you can proceed to award this, and they give us a copy of the certification order. So we know they're certified. It's actually attached to the court communication today. To be able to test with the state, a vendor first has to get a certification with the EAC, and that's done through, and I know it's because I used to work developing voting machines and went through these labs and tests. You have to go through very rigorous testing with a certified testing lab. So they completed that at a federal level. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to take the test, to go through the certification testing at the state level. And then at the state level, there is a team comprised of members of the Attorney General's office and the Secretary of State who review compliance with law and functional testing and all the technology aspects of it. And so that's a certification that the state issues for them. So basically, the Secretary of State is telling us this is a solution usable for elections in Texas. And one thing, I know that, and I can't talk to any of the vendors, but I know from social media is that this system has actually been used in South Carolina, official election already. I don't know their laws or their rules, but there has previous usage in an official election already. So that's.
What election was that?
It was this year. I think it was May or April. I remember seeing it.
In South Carolina, you don't know what, for example, what county?
I just saw it. Again, like I said, I can't talk to the vendor because we're still under that limited communication, but it is something that I did see under press releases and things on the internet. It's like, oh, they're already using the system. Great.
Knowing that this issue was coming up this morning, I reached out this morning to the chair of the Tarrant County Democratic Party. She did not make it clear to me that there was not a representative of the party at the demonstration, but she did say to me that she supports the recommendation of the elections department and the purchasing department. Based upon conversations that she's had with Hyder about the equipment and based upon her confidence in him as an elections administrator.
Thank you.
So is that a motion?
Sounds like a statement to me.
It was a statement.
Well, I will make a motion that we approve the recommendation of purchasing for the purchase of the HART system.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank all of y'all who came and spoke. I know you may not be happy with the decision, but we certainly appreciate you coming out and expressing your opinions.
Our second item is a bid award recommendation for bid 2019-177. This is a contract for copier maintenance and supplies. Our recommendation be toward a per enterprise basis, awarding to the primary and secondary vendors meeting all specifications as shown in your court communique.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 3 is also a bid award recommendation for bid 2019-203. This is our annual contract for flexible road-based materials for use countywide. Our recommendation be to award a pre-enterprise basis, awarding to the 6 primary vendors as shown in your court communique.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 4, excuse me, also is it's an item in regards to request for qualifications 2019-185, which is for independent validation verification services for domestic relations. We are seeking permission from Commissioners Court to conduct negotiations with Underwood Software Association Incorporated.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 5, an item in regards to bid 2019-170. This is a bid for the purchase of software and hardware for the case management project for information technology. We are recommending rejection of all bids and seeking to rebid with revised specifications. There were problems with the specifications, and they need some attention.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion to second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 6, an item in regards to RFP 2019-176. This was an RFP for full-body rapid digital radiology system, forensic pathology, the ME's office. We are recommending rejection of both proposals and seeking to rebid with revised specifications.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion to second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Last item number 7, item in regards to bid 2019-182, bid for main switchboard replacement for resource connection buildings 1400 5051. We are recommending rejection of all 3 bids. They exceeded the budget available, and this particular project has been put on hold now.
Move approval.
Second.
A motion to second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
I could have raised a question about why does the medical examiner, why do they need anything rapid?
Do quick now.
I'm glad you didn't ask that.
Well, I did. Okay. Commissioner Allen.
Yes. I have an interlocal agreement for Kennedale, so I move for approval of item N1A and B.
Second.
We have a motion to second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Are there any appointments? I have one. I'm going to appoint Curley to the MHMR board.
Who?
Kerry Cockrell.
Okay.
Nickname Curly? Nickname Curly? Is that an inside joke? Oh, okay.
Curly, he said.
I can't think of a better person. I mean, Kerry served this county for a long, long period of time as the head of our juvenile detention area, and has gone off and been the head of Kentucky and a couple of states from that standpoint. So he's back in the area and expressed interest, and so I would nominate Kerry Cockrell for a position on MHMR.
I second with enthusiasm.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the court, we have 2 items to bring to you this morning. The first is an update on the hospital district's bond program. Mr. Early is here to address the court at this time.
Well, as Mr. Early makes his way, I just want to say that I am totally digging Yes to JPS website. I think it looks great.
Our goal is to have you totally dig it at all times. Thank you. For the record, your medical examiner's joke, I laughed. It was a quiet laugh, but I laughed. It was good. Also, I want to mention Mr. Manius's intelligence in bringing Bill Hanna on board. Bill has interviewed me, and Bill is a reporter that I think has ethics and integrity, and I'm proud he's with the county, and I think you'll do a wonderful job. So thank you, Bill, for being here. And Mr. Manius, thank you for your level of intelligence. A couple people to introduce. Charlie Powell. Mr. Powell, I thank you for being smart. Charlie Powell, our board chair, is here. And as I mentioned before, our board members are paid in cookies. And so the fact that he attends so many of our functions, does so much, is so supportive, means a lot to staff, means a lot to me. So I want to thank Charlie for being here. He has a day job. He runs a bank.
Means he eats a lot of cookies.
He does eat a lot of cookies, and we haven't given him any cookies for today's meeting, but I want to thank Charlie Powell for being a board chair who is active, concerned, and concentrated. I also want to thank Lorraine Miller for being here. Lorraine co-chaired the Blue Ribbon Committee, and although I am colorblind, even that outfit she has on today makes her the brightest person in the room. And I want to thank her because she is a delight, and she was hugely helpful. And so were all the members of the Blue Ribbon Committee. And what the Blue Ribbon Committee did for us is it gave us community opportunity for a voice. It gave us a period of time by which people could come by and talk and chat and discuss the bond packages. And it gave a great starting point. It gave a point by which we had some level of direction as we began to go down this process. At each step of the process, we mature, we figure out the right ways to go. Some of the recommendations can slightly be altered or even changed in some cases as we deal with the dynamic nature of healthcare and its delivery. And you don't want to make a mistake. We want to be very cautious about this. For those that are saying you're going slow or we want you to go faster, I want everybody to realize that the decisions we make as a board, a staff, and a court will be the decisions that this community needs to live with for the next 30 to 40 years in some of our financial decisions and some of our patient care decisions. So they are meaningful, powerful, and they should be done with a great deal of due diligence as we go through the process. What I thought I would do today is sort of give you a bit of an update. But before I do that, I want to tell you that it's my hope, belief, and recommendation that the court, which I have great respect for, and so does our board, have a strong working relationship with the board. I realize you appoint those individuals, but this to me is almost like a dance, and it takes two partners. There is a genuine community concern that you as elected officials have that we respect immeasurably for what you deliver to your community and what you deliver to your constituents. What kind of health care package are you telling them that we're advancing into? What do we do with the stewardship of their money? That is not only your responsibility, is it one that we take great pride and respect in at the board. The board has the luxury of hearing from staff oftentimes on a weekly basis, a monthly basis at board meetings, and they have insight oftentimes into our patient base. And then we as staff have the ability from outside consultants, from seminars, from colleagues in the industry, from experiments throughout the nation that have worked and experiments that have failed, to bring the best we can to our board as staff recommendations. None of those are made in a vacuum. Some of those will be made with a great deal of applause and gratitude, and some of them will be made with a scratch of the head and say, why did you do that? But some of the information that we have today, much like a vote that you take, you can't regret your votes. You're going to make the best votes and the best decisions you can with the information you have in front of you. That may happen on a Tuesday and Wednesday. Some of that might change. But you still are firm in standing behind your strong votes for the information you had at that time. So we as a staff and we as JPS are going to make the best decisions that we can with the information that we have, that we provide to our board, that our board looks at and reviews, and they work with you in that effort. Nobody should get out in front of each other. Nobody should be saying we did this and we shouldn't listen to the board and the board says we shouldn't listen to the court. It's an amicable relationship and it will continue at every level that I can possibly allow it to continue at, and you will help me do that. So a couple things. We went back and looked very diligently at the Blue Ribbon Committee. Trent Petty, our chair of our planning committee, and our board members had a great deal of discussion, and we've had a great deal of discussion about these items for 7 years. Every time that year passes or the discussion gets greater, we have more fruit on that tree. We see more possibilities and more opportunities. One of the things that our board discussed at the planning committee, which served as a board meeting where we had 10 of our members, is the opportunity to look at 2 additional community clinics. These community clinics would be patterned after the one that we recently put up last year in Precinct 3. That is a clinic that is working well for us. It's serving our patient base well. We located it in a smart spot, and there's a lot of considerations to a JPS clinic. We are a transportation challenged community in a lot of different ways. Not because we don't have it, it's because we've got a vast expanse to try to move people and get them where they need to go at exact dots on a map. So we want to locate that JPS clinic as close as we can so it's the easiest travel for a population of patients that oftentimes have little to no vehicular capabilities that they own and they can control. So we want to be able to make sure that we're looking at any transit that we possibly have and make it the best as possible in a challenging situation. The other thing that we found out years ago when we had a partnership with the Salvation Army off of Lancaster is we realized that even though we had a clinic at the Salvation Army, we were missing a lot of our homeless population because it was a tenth to a quarter of a mile away from the epicenter of the homeless population. And when your transportation is by foot, it makes a big difference. And that was a lesson for us to make sure, like we do with the True Worth Clinic, it is in the most epicenter in this county of where our homeless population exists. There are other pockets of homeless people, but the greatest level of that is within that Lancaster region right next to Union Gospel and Presbyterian Night Shelter. So those are important. So when we look at creating 2 new clinics, the Blue Ribbon Committee made the suggestion that there be 4. We want to make sure that we're not only doing it smart and doing it wise. Our discussion has been, let's start with 2. The luxury to that is the growing population of Tarrant County would demand more outreach clinics. The aspects of an emergency room that is constantly at its capacity speaks loudly and clearly that the best way is to create an integrated care model so that we can get the best care to people that we can in front of an emergency room, not behind the emergency room, so that your emergency room becomes your primary care unit. Can't always do that. There is the culture of the individual who will want to go by the emergency room for whatever reason they choose to do that, but it is incredibly overutilized. So if we can create those community clinics, we have a possibility of being good stewards to the taxpayers by having better, effective health care delivered at lower cost and far greater upstream care. So that's what those clinics are designed to do. Now, to that point, we want to make sure that there is a very large behavior and mental health component. Because one of the issues, and I'll talk about it here in a second, that the Blue Ribbon Committee suggested, and that we have seen the outcry of this community, and you have heard, is that we need more beds. We need more beds for mental health. And we know that, and we need to do that, and that will be a significant part of this bond, but we need to build the right beds, and we need to do the right thing. And one of those things is trying to treat mental health much like we do primary care health. And that is create those outlets where people can seek care on a daily basis or a weekly basis in a clinic-type setting so that they're not all structured for a bed setting. And that may change whether we have a 200-bed building or a 300-bed building or a 400-bed building. I would ask upon you as a court, as we as the board have looked at this and we as staff have looked at this, is let us begin to attempt to make a dent into what's coming through the front door in an emergency setting or what's coming into a psychiatric center. And if we can do that and get more outreach, I think we can make major benefits to those needing mental health and needing mental health needs. So that's what we're going to do at those 2 clinics. They will have a strong community outreach for behavioral health. Now, the site location, which will change this from a good feel to why did you locate it there feel, is now what we're going to go through. And we have asked an organization to help us look at our patient base, where it lives, and strongly look at the demographics and where that population center is. We have huge growth throughout Tarrant County, and some of that huge growth is not represented by a JPS clinic. The other thing we need to take into consideration, when we were in Commissioner Fickus's precinct, we took Brown Trail, which was an older facility, which was an old hospital, as you all well know, which was not conducive to patient flow, and it was not conducive to a clinic setting. And we shut that facility down and moved it 1.5 miles down the road to our new center, and it worked very well. The luxury to that was we kept the same staff and moved them. There is a possibility with these 2 new clinics that your maintenance and operation costs will be far greater because we will be adding to our FTE population and our full-time employees. We'll have a whole team of nurses and doctors and nurse practitioners and caregivers that we currently don't have on board, and so we'll be doing that. The luxury, yes,
Robert,
Commissioner.
let me stop you a minute.
Yes, sir.
I would like to suggest to you that you adopt some language to describe these facilities that is different from community clinics.
Okay.
Because these facilities are different from the community clinics that we already have. I believe that the language in the Blue Ribbon Committee's report is regional medical homes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That to me is a lot better description of what we're building than we're merely building 2 new community clinics.
Yes, sir.
Because that's not what we're suggesting that we're going to do.
No, sir.
We're building something that is larger and more comprehensive and includes more community-based services than our standard community clinic model. And so we need to be able to tell people that with the language that we use to describe what we're proposing to build.
Yes, sir. And I think your point is very well taken. And they indeed are a medical home model. The medical home model will be about 35,000 square feet, which makes it larger. For those who have been to the newest facility that we built in Precinct 3, it will model that. The box size will be very similar. What's inside of it will probably be different based on what that population is. For example, you don't want to make a mistake and say, we're going to put behavioral health in there, and find out that the population base has a geriatric behavioral health issue with dementia and Alzheimer's, and you're going to really look at that population. It may be a medical home model that you put where you have a lot of adolescent psychiatry issues. You have a younger population. You may have different issues that you face there. But the behavioral health, mental health aspects of it will be significant, and you're right. Your point is well taken. They're not the same old JPS type clinic. It is a larger, more conducive environment, and let me explain that even further, and I appreciate your suggestion. What we want to be able to do, because healthcare is a matter of convenience, it works best when it is convenient. So when the caregiver, which is oftentimes the female of a household, comes in for a woman's wellness exam, she can bring her 3 children, and her 3 children can get their pediatric care there, and she can take her husband by the ear, which is usually how they're led, into the clinic, and they can get their men's wellness exam. And we can have a conducive whole environment for the patient and the family. So that's what a medical home represents. It's more designed to be more of the one-stop, that you can get all your care there, from your films that you need, looking at the orthopedics on down, and that's what those models are. That's why the newest model that we have online, for the time that it's been up, has been very effective and working exceptionally well.
The other thing that I'd like to point out is that it is important that you include mental and behavioral health in all of these 4 clinics, because it's going to be a part of the mental health infrastructure. Not only do we need to triple the amount of inpatient beds as was recommended by the Blue Ribbon report, we also need a community-based mental health component.
Yes, sir.
In order to have an integrated health system. And between the 2, I'm going to continue to suggest that we need a crisis diversion center, and you and I will talk about what that looks like.
Yes, sir.
And I think
as we go forward.
To that end, we have had some conversations about maybe involving the Meadows Foundation and helping us develop a model for mental health that would be, not just, okay, let's build another 200 beds.
Yes, sir. And the reason that that's smart is Meadows in particular has a history in the last 5 years of looking at successful programs, helping them build that. They just put a program together for the Austin State School, which is now an integrated model rather than just a state school, and they're working throughout the nation. We don't need to reinvent all wheels. And again, we'll look closely at the San Antonio model that you brought to our attention. We'll look at other models. Zelia Ball, our vice president, has gone down to San Antonio to look at their facility. We've gone to Arizona to look at the successful crisis management programs there. Again,
I would also lift up for your consideration Miami-Dade County in Florida.
I appreciate that. We will definitely look at that. What you don't want to do in this county, as you all discussed earlier in your debate and even the debate of the citizens, is we want to do the right thing in this county, and the right thing is not having your county jail as the largest mental health facility that we have.
Absolutely.
It's not smart for taxpayers, and it's not smart for patients. Everything that we've done here that we look at, we've taken two major considerations, the patient and the taxpayer. It's critical. We've got experts at JPS. We have experts. Angie Morgan is here. Angie is a sweet, kind lady until you do anything wrong on the construction site, and she's not sweet and kind anymore. She is a wonderful person doing great work, and JPS is lucky to have her. Lou Mattingly is another young man who's an engineer, who's part of our team, who heads up a lot of these projects. You've got some good people at JPS helping make these decisions, and where we don't, we'll supplement that. So this facility would be looking at a 35,000 square foot building. It will potentially inside the building be built slightly different than what we have in Precinct 3 because there'll be different components to it based on what we determine the patient population is in that area. The cost of each one of these medical home models will be about $20 million. That's larger than what we did for Precinct 3's because we're including land cost in there and we're including the abilities that we're starting from scratch and potentially some of these, not moving anybody in. So the cost is a little bit greater because we have land and we have the behavioral health component, which will be greater and stronger. So that just gives you, now that's not exact, but that's a ballpark figure. The other thing is we are able to use the architect that created the model for Precinct 3. That architect is already on board. We've talked to legal counsel to make sure that we're appropriately doing that. So that architect is on board, which will expedite the matter somewhat. So we have a possibility within a shorter period of time having those two clinics out into the community, better serving our patients through integrated care.
Will you go back and talk about site location determination? I'm not sure if you have more to add there, but if so.
I won't have more to add at this time. I won't give you the ability to dig it just yet until we talk to the group of people that we've hired to go do that. They are 3 weeks into their studies now about the demographics. And when we get that report, I will directly relate it to the court and to the board. Every detail of it. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Talk about expediting by using the same architect. I hope we're also reducing, and it's not going to be the usual fee because we've already got a lot of that building designed.
Yes, sir. It will be, again, going back to that stewardship model, it is a smart thing to do because it will cost less because we already have the prototype. We already have it out there.
Not getting charged the architect fee over.
Not that I'm aware of. We've had that discussion with them, and it was an amicable discussion for us. Worked well. Yes, sir.
When that comes forward, I'll be wanting to look at it.
Yes, and I would expect and want you to, and I have no problem with that. Let's go to the second area.
Because you know I'm a bean counter.
And
I just can imagine that their time involved is going to be a whole lot different.
Let's go to the second area. One of the things that the Blue Ribbon Committee suggested that we took great accord with, and our experts have suggested, and our employees and our patients. Many of our community witnesses at the Blue Ribbon Committee talked about this, and it's the inconvenience, the safety, and the challenges that we put our patients through having a psychiatric emergency room on the 10th floor of a building. It is not smart. It is not wise. It was a decision that was made before all of us came here. I don't know the confines of why that decision was made. It may have been that's the only space JPS had, and it was better than not having it. But in retrospect and in current day, it is a challenge. It's a challenge for our police officers to meander through the building and get to the 10th floor. It's a challenge for those people who are the caregivers to family members who are volatile, and they're trying to get down through the first floor of JPS, through the main entrance, to the elevators, and up to the 10th floor. That is not conducive to patient care. So our suggestion is, and I think it will directly affect when we talk about the bed numbers. So I want you all to know that this is not a graduated type situation. This is all one. Our first step into mental health is to take that 10th floor psychiatric emergency room and put it on land first ground level. We also would suggest that we currently have a 12,500 foot space, which is overwhelmed by our patient and our patient population today. We would suggest making that a 28,000 square foot facility, and it would be located right now next to Trinity Springs, our current location, but it would not be designed until we pick the architect. We'd go out for an RFP for an architect to design that, who would design that psychiatric emergency that would tie into Trinity Springs, but ultimately tie in to what we want as our new bed facility.
It's a one-story facility.
It is a one-story facility right now. Is that correct, Angie? Is it one story? Yes.
Robert, I'm afraid that we're getting our head out ahead of our skis by piecemealing this whole mental health process. Yes, it's a bad situation to have the psych emergency room on the 10th floor of the patient tower. But to just decide we're going to build a new psych emergency room without having any idea what we're going to do with Trinity Springs seems to me to be a case of jumping the gun.
Sure. And I appreciate your analogies to jumping the gun and ahead of the skis. I don't think we are ahead of the skis, because if you started right now and trying to create a 100-bed, 200-bed, or a 300-bed facility, which we know we ultimately need, you're at least 3 years out. And with the growing population, particularly of our emergency psychiatric patient, and let me emphasize, as you well know, we are the only center in all of Tarrant County for psychiatric emergency patients. Everybody comes to us. If we don't solve that first and deal with that first, I would argue that anything that comes next will not be conducive to the best care. And if we can create that psychiatric emergency room and put it in the right place, and it does fit the footprint of JPS, there are only so many locations that you're going to be able to build a new psychiatric center. So this facility, this psychiatric center, this psychiatric room, this capability, this building, it would be connected to the new building. And that architectural work will go simultaneously together. The greatest component right now is it's not just safety and convenience. It is not a conducive way to deal with your patient base, particularly the large amounts that we currently see. With suicidal patients, with the volatility of those patients, it is a much smarter way to deal with them for their own care. That would be connected, but if you don't want to do that, and we'll certainly listen to your ideas and suggestions and enact them, but my fear is, and my strong argument would be, we're 3 years out from that. It's not going to take 3 years to put up a 28,000 square foot, one-story facility that will be immediate benefit to our patients right now. And I think it will be immediate benefit to our law enforcement officials as well. I do respect your comment.
How do we make sure that it integrates with the other mental health facilities that we're going to surely need to build?
You have an outpatient and you have emergency patients. all of that's going to, as it does now, it all fits together. It's just a matter of building facilities that fit together and making sure that that's the case. What you hope you get is the people that are out in the community that are not able to find community care, don't get a situation at all, whether they're manic depressant or whatever their psychosis or ailment is. They're coming and overutilizing a psychiatric emergency room today, just like we have in our regular emergency room. If you can integrate that more, you might be able to lessen that really tough population struggle that we're currently having in our psych emergency center. If you could integrate that better, I think that makes a big difference. And some of those patients do need care on a walk-in basis, but it's hard to find in the community. If we can create that integrated model, I think we're in much better shape.
Robert?
Yes, sir.
On the psychiatric facility, what type of parking do you envision for that facility? Is that some shared parking that's existing? Are you going to, where I'm coming from, if you have to surface park, you need 3 acres probably for that building.
Yes,
for
sir.
The building and the adequate parking. Is that in the, do you have 3 acres?
Let me,
for that building?
yes, sir. Let me take your question in a couple stages. I'm a firm believer that JPS and you as a court need to constantly think of the smartest ways to pay down the debt on this bond, make sure that we're building for the future, and make sure that we have the money for that. The challenge for JPS is adhering to our mission, which we live by daily, which is why we come into work, is a challenge because your margins are going to be quite thin. So JPS needs to look at opportunities that are conducive for the other hospitals that we work with. And JPS right now underutilizes its land resources. To have land on the corner of Magnolia and Main and use it for surface parking, and have land on the corner of Hempel and Allen, which has now become more prime real estate, we park cars on it. That's not smart. So what we're suggesting in this is you have a high-rise parking garage to deal with those folks that would be now coming into a center that would be larger and greater. When I started at JPS, we had roughly 4,700 employees. We have approximately 6,700 employees, and we still have the same parking. The greatest dissatisfier for our guests dropping off patients or coming to visit patients and our employees is our parking situation. It's not just a convenience, it's a challenge. So in this plan, in this first sort of venture into some of the new buildings, it would include a garage for our guests and for our patients, and it would be
And that's in the overall budget.
Yes, sir.
It's for structured parking versus surface parking.
Yes, sir. And let me also tell you that we don't know it right now exactly how many slots we would need for that parking garage, but we do know that the average cost of a slot for a parking garage is $15,000. So you can look if maybe it is. I've never heard $15,000 slot cheap. I don't find it cheap, but if that is the price, then that's what has been quoted to us. Yeah. So we want to look at that. So there would be a parking element to this as well. The last thing that I would mention to you all is the possibility of a patient care center, and I will tell you the name seems to change on a daily basis because it has a variety of services put in it. When you all came over to JPS and took a tour of JPS, on our second floor, we have a variety of our clinics. We have ophthalmology, we have orthopedics, and those patients, as Mr. Manius, you will remember, those patients wait for their visits in the hallway. Those rooms are excessively small, and that was not designed to be clinic. Many of our board members are concerned with that. We would have the ability to, right next to our pavilion where we have the space, put in a patient care center where we would move those clinics across the street. You'd get more, I think, a better throughput and flow for your patients. We would also look at expanding our ORs, which, with all respect, I don't think JPS was wise 14 years ago when it built its new pavilion, and it created 12 ORs, which was what they already had. They didn't expand their ORs, and you could have projected population increases. And that's what I don't want to get JPS into this time. So when the new pavilion came about, they took down the old 12 ORs and moved the 12 ORs, and they didn't expand. This would be the ability to have convenience for our patients, because we have a variety of patients that need care and need surgeries at JPS, just not our trauma patients. And we oftentimes reschedule, change because of traumas. Because you are the major trauma center, it's very difficult if you are there for an elective surgery or there for a day-type surgery. It's difficult. Right now, we have our day surgery facility in Arlington. It's at the corner of New York and 20. It's not in a population base where our population of patients is. And so what unfortunately happens is we end up transporting a lot of patients from outside of Arlington over to the Arlington facility. It's not the wisest use of patient time, and that's not the best way to do it. So we would suggest that patient care center have new clinics in it and have an expansion of ORs so that we can have a better ability to deal with the day and deal with the changes that you have when you have a trauma center.
One of the things that we've talked a little bit about on our committee, and then I think we've conveyed it back and forth both to the hospital board as well as this, I am still a little concerned at the fact, I mean, I think that whatever we call them, and I agree with your assertion that we need to call them something other than clinics, those are away from the main campus.
Yes, sir.
I would like for the court and for the hospital board to maybe have some discussion about whether we need an all-encompassing quote-unquote guru quarterback that looks at all this stuff, because we've talked about putting the mental health over here, and we've talked about operating rooms, and we've talked, I've heard people talk about you need to update your power supply, your whole power unit, and I know that it will cost us money, and I'm not just setting concrete on this, but and it may cost us as much as $25 million, but as far as a consulting fee goes, but it's one of those things where I'm concerned that we're once again just saying we're going to put it here, we're going to put it here, and as opposed to let's develop a plan, an overall plan that says ultimately this is going to be where we are, and we need to get there by this step, and this step. And I know that there's some reluctance to spending that money on consultants, but I'm not. We've got after we get past the centers, regional centers, we're still going to have about $1.1 billion to spend. Yeah. And I just don't want to do that. We'll put it here, and then by the time we get over here, we say, golly, if we'd only thought about this when we built this, or when we built this, if we'd only thought about, I want it to be somewhat comprehensive, and that's going to be a little bit more slower, and all of us, every time we go someplace, when's the mental health tower going up? Mm-hmm. That's the first question I'm asked, and I'm conscious of that, and we did have to wait through, in my mind, we had to get through the legislative session to see if they were going to put you under the same rules that they put us under.
Yes, sir.
And they didn't, so I think we're ready to move forward, but I want to be very deliberate about the spending of this $1.1 billion and not wake up when it's all over with and say, golly, I wished we'd have thought about this when we did the other two. And the last project on the list is going to be, I don't want us to start thinking about the last project when we should have started thinking about it at the very beginning.
Judge, I couldn't agree with you more. We're beginning to get into piecemealing this thing just to have something coming out of the ground. I've advocated from the beginning of this process that we need a plan, that we need a program management organization to help us lay this out and know the consequences of doing this rather than that. so that we efficiently can spend this money. Angie's staff doesn't have the capability to manage a $1.2 billion construction program. Our facilities department doesn't have the capability to do that either. We need some help to get this right. And it bothers me that we're beginning to do all these things without a plan.
I agree. In the last update, it seemed as though how it was articulated how we would move forward, that there would be the project management approach. And now it seems that we've changed that, or if I'm hearing correctly, so please correct me where I'm wrong.
No, I don't think we have, and I think we're still all on the same page. And if you go back even to the Boca Powell report, and so let me step back for a second with respect to your comments and Judge, your comments, and Commissioner Allen, what will be yours as well. It's not planless, and there is no plan. If you go back to the Boca Powell, which we did 8 years ago when we hired that consulting group to help us before we even began to talk about a bond, there is a footprint at JPS which would at least begin to guide you. And that guidance comes from getting all your acute care on one side of the street. One of the problems is you transport a lot of patients at your main facility. The other part of that plan, and has been discussed over the years, is your best way to create levels of community outreach and making sure that you have the grid of, at that point, clinics, but medical home models to make sure that the population of this community could be well served. So you have the beginnings of that. It is not planless in that regard. So to that point, every report we've seen and every discussion we've had has pretty much been you have to create the best environment of integrated care out into the community, hence the 2 new clinics. So it's not without a plan. You're going to need those 2 new clinics, and that goes without a whole lot of debate as to those clinics out in the community. Being smart in where you locate them is critical. And I do think we need a project manager. You're right. You can't do it with your construction crew right now. The one additive that I would put to that is I think you need an element for mental health as well. You need that. You need somebody that does specialize in mental health and has that expertise. So there is no opposition from the board or me or anybody else. But this and this briefing today is to tell you where that first beginning movement should be. It's not a piecemeal type situation. There's going to be little space at where you can move any level of psychiatric emergency. And psychiatric emergency is critical. It is truly critical from what our population is seeing right now. There is an immediacy there. So all of these will fit into that plan, but now it is time for the project manager approach to this and doing it well. But I don't want the description to be that it is without plan, because there is a plan. I just think now you're getting down to the intricacies of making sure you make the right decisions.
Thank you, Commissioner Fix.
I'm going to wait and visit with GK.
Okay.
Any other? Go right ahead.
Related to the Blue Ribbon Committee, now of course I observed that process but wasn't part of the process because I wasn't on the court. And I understood what their original charge is. Would you talk about how they've been re-engaged and if there is a new charge?
There is not a new charge for the Blue Ribbon Committee, because it's my understanding that the Blue Ribbon Committee served in their purpose in making some of those recommendations and listening to the numerous people that came before them. We'll certainly try to make sure that we're updating them, giving them information as we move. To Commissioner Brooks's point, I don't want JPS to get ahead of its skis and get ahead of the court. I don't think you want a citizen body being told certain things about a direction when we haven't had that discussion between the 2 partners of the court and the board. So I want to make sure that I time that wise.
And it may be time, and I think Robert hit on a point that I think is a very good point, that we have the Board of Managers and their meeting, and then we have the Commissioners Court and our meeting. I think the court might want to consider a joint workshop with the Commissioners Court and the board in a relatively short period of time, so that your ideas, your concerns are laid out, you hear them, and then we come to a conclusion on how we want to move forward, such as the project management piece, or the program management piece. Is not just project management.
Exactly.
It's program
management.
So we have, everyone has a clear understanding of how we're going to move forward.
We would be delighted for that. Mr. Manius and I had that discussion. I've worked now with Mr. Powell as a chair going on 3 years, and so I can read his eye contact, and it said, yeah, that's a good idea. So I really welcome that, and I think that would serve really well to have those joint meetings to discuss, so that we're all discussing it. Again, you add a critical element to it. The board adds a critical element, and staff adds a critical element. If you have all three of those, it works. If you have any one going out of kilter, I don't think we're going to do the best delivery for patient and taxpayer.
I think that's right.
I think that's a great idea. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Any other questions of Robert at this time?
I just want to elaborate that when I said yes to JPS, I meant, and I don't know if I actually referenced the full URL, but it's yes2jps.org. So I would invite the watching, the listening audience to visit that website, where it shows what's been done so far and gives a brief update on what's to come. So
thank you, and I appreciate your kind words. And the team is working hard with that, and we communicate with GK, and now we'll communicate with Mr. Hanna as well to make sure that we at JPS are coordinated with the county, and hence my comments about Mr. Hanna, and I think he'll do very well in that regard.
And I'm sure, Alice, that Commissioner Howland will be glad to help Commissioner Johnson review that website.
He's already called a couple of times and said, I'm trying to figure out the URL for this, and we've helped him through that. So it worked out really well.
And we'll go ahead also, and we're recording this, we'll put this clip of this discussion on that site also.
I have never stood before you this length of time, so I want to thank the audience for viewing my backside for 45 minutes. You all are kind. Thank you very, very much.
It's not a criticize.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Judge.
Did you, just as a sidebar, did you get the chairs? There's 20 of them.
Yes, sir. And what that is, what the judge is referring to, is there's been a organization in town that has chairs for cancer patients, and they contacted the judge not knowing exactly who to contact, saying they wanted to make that a gift and donation. So we quickly met with them, and I believe we're going to the warehouse today to meet with them. That was a wonderful opportunity for our cancer patients.
And what that was, Alex Jimenez, who was on our sheriff's regular civil service board, came in yesterday and said that Herman Miller had constructed, built, whatever, about 20 extra of these chemotherapy chairs, the recliners, the ones that are, and they were just looking for some place to give those chairs, and so we thought about JPS and get them.
It was a great opportunity. I do want to thank you all for this process. We've never had a bond package this large, and we've never had a bond package for JPS in y'all's careers or mine. And so we want to do what's right. And so I greatly appreciate this. This is, I know that Anna is here at the Star Telegram. This is what you want your community to do. This is the discussion you want to have. And so on behalf of staff, I think I speak for the board, Trent Petty and Mr. Powell as well, this is the dialogue you want. You don't want to make mistakes, and you want to do what's right. If we keep patience and we keep taxpayer in mind, we won't. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Robert. Appreciate you. Mr. Mania's budget.
Do we have an audience participation form on
We
this particular
do.
issue?
Daniel Caldwell. Daniel, come forward. Now, you're addressing an item that's not on our agenda, which means we cannot respond to you, so I don't want you to think that when you get finished speaking and we can't say anything, that we don't care, but we're prohibited by law from responding.
Yes, sir. to the court. I was asked to share some concerns that members of the community around True Worth and Union Gospel and DRC had. Namely, they don't, let's see, the facilities, most of them close at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and since they're looking for a place to sleep, that makes it kind of hard to check in the afternoon, evening hours. So there was a request to make it so that the lines aren't as long, or that they let you check in a little later so that you get to basically go straight to bed rather than waiting around for 8 hours in order to go to sleep for 7. Then more to the point, with trying to keep people healthy, they're peeing on the sidewalk because they don't have even a porta potty. A public toilet, preferably with running water, would not cost the $25 million that it costs to build a new facility to provide world-class health care to people who frankly can't afford it. Meanwhile, as a public health concern, this would, for relatively small dollars, have a relatively big impact to the thousands of people that we have on the streets. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, first of all, I apologize. I thought his comments were going to be something that Mr. Early had talked about. But what we'll do, I've already asked Ms. Ward and with our community development to talk to this gentleman to see if we can at least figure out if there's anything we can do.
So, sir,
This is
Ms. Ward, Patricia, hold your hand up. Thank you very much, Daniel, for being here today.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I apologize for that.
It's all right.
So we could go to item B on the budget issues. While we're not going to have any discussions today, we did want to point out that next Tuesday we're going to address at least three different issues. We've already asked the District Attorney's Office to provide us some clarity as it relates to what activities fall under the heading of legislative and administrative activities for the reporting on the budget. We hope we'll get that by the end of this week so that we can start collecting that. That's something that the Budget Office needs to have, not only for go forward in FY20, but I think also for FY19. Next week, we're also going to talk about salary issues and policies as it relates to future members of the judiciary and the District Attorney's Office. And then also next week, we're also going to have some recommendations that the Budget Office is going to make to the Commissioner's Court. So we're in the process of now turning to that last leg of the budget process. So you'll see that next week, along with the discussion on JPS and their FY20 budget.
So is anyone presenting anything today?
Not at staff level.
Anyone else have anything?
We had one item that Budget was going to talk to you about. It was, I think she handed out a sheet. It's a $5,300 issue. We can either do that now or wrap it into the discussion that we have next week. I also believe that Mr. Schaffner had given you all some additional information as far as judicial salaries and issues such as that we'll be more than happy to talk about next week.
This is what you're referring to?
Yes.
Right. And is that deleting aluminum mini blinds from the project?
Yes, but we can put it on next week when we do have the remainder.
Okay.
But Your Honor, you all may have some other issues you want to talk about on budget when you have that agendized to talk about it now, or you can wait till next week.
You know, I think the other thing that I had asked, and I talked a little bit with audit, simply about showing you, and there's no reason for us to put it forth today, but it was just showing currently where we are, what is a very rough estimate of what would have happened had we been under the 3.5% cap this year, what effect that would have had on the M&O tax revenue that you use to come into that you use to help formulate your budget. And then also what a penny decrease would cost us, and then what a half a penny decrease would cost us. And so between now and next week, we might go ahead and also get that passed around to everyone. It seemed like there was something else, but
I want to bring up the fact that one of our former employees and a friend of many of us, Smokey Vanover, who's son Chuck Vanover, one of our judges, Smokey passed away yesterday. He'd been ill for a number of years, but passed away yesterday. I don't know any of the details, but Sharon, do you know any? Have you heard anything? I don't know any details yet. Okay. I would hope we might close court today in memory of Smokey and keep that family in our thoughts and prayers.
Does anyone else have any comments at this time?
That's all we have at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, so we'll recess our open meeting and proceed to close to discuss items exempt under section 551, 1071, 072, 074, 076, and 087 of the Texas Government Code. Having returned from our closed session, there being no business to conduct at this time, we're adjourned.